probably came into Mosiah's possession around the latter portion of 121 BC, when Limhi's people found the land of Zarahemla and became Mosiah's subjects. Here's that passage. And it came to pass that the people of King Limhi did depart by night into the wilderness. And after being many days in the wilderness, they arrived in the land of Zarahemla and joined Mosiah's people and became his subjects. And it came to pass that Mosiah received them with joy, and he also received their records, and also the records which had been found by the people of Limhi. That's from Mosiah 22, verse 11, verses 13 and 14. Okay, so while it is possible that Benjamin was still alive at this point in time, his name is conspicuously absent from the record here. Sometime after this, in about 120 BC, Mosiah read some records to the general populace. These included the Xenophite Annals and Alma's record. They did not include the Jaredite records in question. It is not until about 92 BC that the Jaredite plates get translated. And it is important to note that they get translated by Mosiah, not Benjamin, inasmuch as Benjamin had died almost 30 years previous. Here's a scripture to support that. Now King Mosiah had no one to confer the kingdom upon, for there was not any of his sons who would accept of the kingdom. Therefore, he took the records which were engraven on the plates of brass, and also the plates of Ephod, and all the things which he had kept and preserved according to the commandments of God, after having translated and caused to be written the records which were on the plates of gold which had been found by the people of Limhi, which were delivered to him by the hand of Limhi. So in summary, it is entirely possible that Nibley is correct in his assumptions that Benjamin may have still been around when the Jaredite records were brought back to Zarahemla with the return of Ammon and Limhi. However, the Book of Mormon text itself lacks clarity on this question, and it is untenable that Benjamin would have lived to see their translation to its coming unless he gave them some kind of preliminary once-over. Okay, a third bit of commentary on this issue was published in 1988 by George A. Horton Jr., then Department Chairman of Ancient Scripture and Associate Professor of Ancient Scripture at BYU. In writing about textual revisions and transmission problems, Professor Horton writes as follows. Perhaps the most difficult change to understand occurs at both Mosiah 21:28 and Ether 4:1. The first edition had Benjamin where Mosiah now appears. Since King Benjamin would not likely have still been living at the time of the text, the prophet changed the 1837 edition reading of Mosiah 21:28. The change in Ether was made in the 1849 edition. We can only speculate about who made the original error. Let's get the word error in quotations there. So Professor Horton acknowledges the difficulty of this textual anomaly, agrees with Sperry that Benjamin would not likely have still been alive when Mosiah 21:28 was written, and leaves the question of the source of the problem to the realm of speculation. And finally, the last published commentary on this issue, of which I am aware was authored by me in the Barnes Review of Books, Barnes Review of Books in the Book of Mormon, what it was called then, Volume 5. In this publication, I was responding to the arguments against the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon raised by the Reverend James White, which I cited earlier. Essentially, I had pointed out that we are not certain when Benjamin died. He may have in fact been alive when the events described in Mosiah 21:28 took place. Or he may have been dead at that time, but Ammon was not aware of it. If Ammon's departure from the land of Zarahemla occurred prior to Benjamin's death, the likelihood is very high that he would have mentioned Benjamin's name to Limhi rather than Mosiah's, even though Mosiah had assumed the role of king. This is because Ammon would have had greater experience under Benjamin as both a king and a holy man, and he likely would have referenced the one with whom he had had a longer history, and who was the senior member of the co-regency case. I made 4 points in that essay, the fourth of which is as follows. As previously indicated, if Benjamin was still alive when Ammon left Zarahemla, then Ammon was correct in citing Benjamin to Limhi in Mosiah 21:28. Thus, the prophet historian Mormon would have correctly written down the name Benjamin, and Joseph Smith, the prophet translator, would have correctly rendered it Benjamin as well. So, why the change in the 1837 edition? I went on to write, it may have been the result of undue concern on the part of the early brethren that a problem of some sort might be apparent with the name Benjamin. This concern would likely have been alleviated had greater thought gone into the issues involved. I myself believe that the change from Benjamin to Mosiah was neither crucial nor necessary. So there we have it. There have not been a great many LDS responses to this issue over the years. Now, my purpose in this paper is to delve a little deeper into the issue, looking a little closer at the various Book of Mormon texts that bear on the question in the hopes that a more plausible explanation will become apparent. Let me now share several thoughts that may serve to deepen our understanding of this textual anomaly. The first thing that needs to be pointed out is the fact that Mosiah 21:28 is one of two passages that chronicles the same historical data. The parallel passage is found in Mosiah 8, verses 13 and 14. Let me put that up there. The presence of parallel passages of the same event is consistently lost on our critics, yet it is crucial in making sense of the scope of the problem. The very presence of parallel renditions of the story brings up the obvious questions. What is the nature of the two records? What is their source? How compatible are the two? Why would there be two different renditions of the same story? Well, the answer is simple, I think. The Book of Mosiah opens at festival time, features a major covenant rite, contains major flashbacks and chiasms, and is clearly a composite record. It is a record containing records within records. We have at least 3 different chronicles taking place at various times within the 29-chapter Book of Mosiah as a whole. We can call the first of these the core Book of Mosiah, or the Book of Mosiah proper. This would consist of chapters 1 through 8 and chapters 25 through 29, totaling 13 of 29 chapters, or 45% of the total. And then we have something called the Record of Zena, which comprises chapters 9 through 22, totaling 14 of 29 chapters, or about 48% of the total. And then there's also a record of Alma, comprising chapters 23 and 24, or about 7% of the total. Now, the passage in Mosiah 8, 13, and 14 is very important to our understanding of what actually took place and who said what to whom. And Ammon said unto him, I can assuredly tell thee, O king, of a man that can translate the records, for he has wherewith that he can look and translate all records that are of ancient date, and it is a gift from God. And the things are called interpreters, and no man can look in them except he be commanded, lest he should look for that he ought not, and he should perish. And whosoever is commanded to look in them, the same is called seer. And behold, the king of the people who are in the land of Zarahemla is the man that is commanded to do these things, and who has this high gift from God. So here we have a passage of Scripture that tells the same event, with the notable exception that King Benjamin is never named. In fact, no one is actually identified by name, but by title. So we are left to wonder whom Ammon had in mind when he identified the person with the gift to translate as the king over the people of Zarahemla. If Ammon was to be understood literally, then Ammon would be speaking of Mosiah, since Mosiah was crowned king, or co-regent, of Zarahemla prior to Ammon's travels to the Nephi. It is always possible that Ammon was speaking without such literalistic strictures and was in fact referring to Benjamin. I'll explore this a little later. Second, one must look at each of these two accounts from the standpoint of originality. In other words, one must reflect on which account is a first-hand account and which one is a second-hand hearsay account. If all of the factors seem equal, the first-person account should be given a bit more weight. As it turns out, it is the account in Mosiah 8 that is the first-person account. It is with this account that we get what appears to be direct quotes from the mouth of Ammon. And this is the account where Ammon fails to name either Mosiah or Benjamin directly. Looking at the nature of the account from Mosiah 21, we find it is not a first-person account, but is part of the narrative history that was a part of the Xenophite record, not the Book of Mosiah proper. It is this record that paraphrases Ammon's comments without actually quoting him. Whether this alleged statement by Ammon can be attributed to a Xenophite scribe who recorded the incident, or whether this alleged statement can be attributed to Mormon's own interpolation cannot be determined. Third, as I hypothesized in my review of James White's anti-Mormon book, Letters to a Mormon Elder, it is entirely possible that Ammon departed on his expedition prior to the death of King Benjamin. And if this is the case, it is very possible that Ammon would have mentioned King Benjamin by name. Naive readers who would argue that Benjamin had to have died prior to the departure of Ammon, since Mosiah 6 verse 5 records his death, while Mosiah 7, 1-3 records the